Welcome to Divorce Dialogues. I'm Catherine Miller. Divorce Dialogues brings expert guests to the airwaves to talk through your divorce questions and fill in the gray areas about separating. From thinking about divorce to how to behave during divorce to what to do after, this is Divorce Dialogue. Welcome to Divorce Dialogues. I'm Catherine Miller. I'm the founder of the Miller Law Group and a trainer at the Center for Understanding in Conflict, and I am on a mission to change how people divorce and help them divorce with dignity. And I'm really happy to welcome Jon D. Tanner to the show today. Jon is president of Summit Advisors at William Joseph Capital Management, and he is a proud Hudson Valley native with over 35 years of experience helping clients navigate life's biggest financial transitions from retirement to legacy planning, including divorce. And he's known for his empathetic, team-based approach and deep community roots. And he brings not just financial wisdom, but a genuine passion for guiding people toward peace of mind and long-term security. Welcome, Jon Tanner, to the show.
Thank you for having me on today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so you have been helping clients manage major transitions, as it says in your bio, for a really long time. So what was it that first drew you to focus on the financial side of divorce? And did that change the way that you approached financial planning overall?
Wow, two-part question right out of the gate. Yeah, early in my career, which actually just spans 40 years now, I realized that quite often money challenges were at the heart of major life changes, whether it be retirement, loss of a spouse, or especially divorce. And people are so focused on the increasing expenses and the dividing of assets and debts that they have great difficulty seeing the bigger picture, which is trying to build stability for a whole new chapter in their life. So, working in that space presents a lot of unique challenges, which I love a challenge, kind of gets me up in the morning. But it also showed me that financial planning isn't just about investments. It's really at its core about helping people make sense of change and find clarity so that they can kind of plan and move through their lives, confidently, make decisions and choices that they need to make.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're saying is that financial planning shouldn't be about the planning. It shouldn't be about the finances. It should be about the planning, right? The whole point of the planning is
Yeah.
to be able to live the life you want to lead, not
Yeah.
about being able to have X dollars in the bank. Is that right?
Yeah, it's not about the numbers. I mean, the numbers are certainly a part of it. They're an integral part of it. They help us make sense of it. But it's really at its core, it's about, your life choices, your life decisions, and getting through it, getting through the other side. So, with peace of mind.
So I think that peace of mind is probably something much yearned for when people are getting divorced, but
Mhm.
not very common, at least during the divorce process itself, right? And so there's so much that comes into play there that when I know and anyone listening to the show, if they don't personally know, can only imagine.
Mhm.
And so, people come into the divorce process with very different levels of sophistication in terms of understanding financial planning and understanding how much money that they're going to need in order to protect the things that mean the most to them, their lifestyle, their children, their
Mhm.
security, their stability, and those kinds of things. And how do you help people? What I'm really thinking is more is more and less is less, right? So if you're
Mhm.
like, okay, well, you could have $10 more, $10 less. Well, who wouldn't take $10 more? But that is just really just more or less. And it's kind of in a vacuum without some sense of underlying information or underlying values. So, how do you help people manage the emotional turmoil of divorce and kind of shake loose that competitive dynamic of more if it's more and less is less to something that's really more sustainable?
I think the first thing that needs to happen is a separation of the emotion from everything else. Okay. Because when you're going through the divorce, when you're in the thick of it, emotion rules everything. And that's the overriding thing that has their attention. And since as an animal, we tend to use tangible things to represent the intangible. Money you can touch, you can feel, it's there. It has a specific value that we can place on it. But oftentimes, in the midst of a divorce, and even beyond it, when you're trying to focus beyond it, the money becomes the representation for all the rest, all the intangible things, all the feelings, the emotions, the fears, the concerns, the anxieties. It becomes the representation of that. and it gets all muddied together. So it's very difficult to really get a sense of where you are and where you want to be. And you need point A and B in order to be able to figure out how to get there. So the first part is helping them untangle the emotion from the money. Okay, the money is just data, it's numbers, and getting at the core of what it means to them, what it represents. It represents their values, their ideals, their hopes, their dreams. Okay. But once you separate the money away from all the rest of that, you can deal with, reality. Okay. Not, and once you have the reality in front of you and you understand it, which is a big part of it, the education is a big part of it because, as we've talked about before, oftentimes you have a very disparate understanding of the finances between both parties, between both spouses. Usually one spouse has handled most of the financial management in the family. And the person who hasn't has this huge anxiety hanging over everything that really it inhibits their ability to make decisions because it creates this fear. What if I make the wrong decision? It can't change. I'm stuck with it. So disentangling the money and the numbers from the emotions, which is one of the great parts about the collaborative process, is because I can take the money and the numbers and deal with that over here, and I can offload or hand off the emotional part to the coaches or the legal issues to the attorneys, and I don't have to deal with those. And it makes it very easy to separate them in my mind, which then I can bring some clarity to the finances and education, bring their level of understanding up to a par so that they can then start to focus on, the reality. Where are we now? And then where do we want to get to? Part of my process is not just gathering the data and painting a picture of where they are now, but probing, questioning, conversing with them, discussing with them. Where do they see themselves beyond the divorce? Okay. And I will keep talking about this for another hour or two if you let me.
Okay, but
Because
let me interrupt you for
I
one
get going
second.
and it's like,
Because I think that what you're saying, and as I'm listening to you, it's
Mhm,
sort of like, well, money is a way to solve the problem. And there may be
mhm,
some financial concerns, right? But
yeah,
money itself is not the problem. The problem shows up in the money. And so
yes,
I think what you're saying is if you understand the problem first, then separate the sort of negotiation from understanding the problem, that until we really understand what the problem is, including all that emotional stuff that has become intertwined with the money conversation, until that's separated out, it's really hard to solve that problem in a way that actually works. Is that right?
it's difficult to solve the problem now, but it's even more difficult to even think beyond the divorce. And that's where a lot of the fear and the anxiety resides. I know, yeah, it's in the divorce now, it's in the process right now, the uncertainty of the process, but at the core of it, below that, is what happens after this? How do I manage? How do I deal? How do I, manage my financial life, much less the rest of my life beyond this? Up until this point, they've had a partner in that. Now they're going it alone. And
Yeah.
that fear really, it's an undercurrent through the whole process. And until you start to unpack that in terms of the finances, it's really difficult to do anything other than focus on what does it look like right now and how do I get through this now?
So
And yeah,
for those people who feel paralyzed by the emotional worries about money during their divorce, what are some of the steps that they can take to get some like clarity and confidence that they are able to move through it and start actually doing that?
well, I think first and foremost, it's organizing. Okay, because until you sit down and really, especially the spouse that has not had an active role in the management of the finances. We have as a species, we have a basic fear of the unknown, and it creates a huge amount of anxiety. And I'm going to try not to keep using the word anxiety every other sentence.
I think anxiety is a very common feeling that people have in divorce.
But the first thing is to get organized. And even though it can seem overwhelming at first, gather all of your financial information. It's all there and available to you. Get bank statements and account statements, investment brokerage account statements, list of all your debts, what you own, what you owe, and write it all down. I mean, I know in today's world, pencil and paper is kind of antiquated, but in terms of a brain, a mental connection, we have a much greater connection to something we're writing down on paper than we do typing onto a screen or downloading screenshots. Okay. If write it down on a piece of paper, organize it, understand it. If you have questions, ask. Now, maybe your soon to be ex is not the person to ask or the best person that you trust, but you can contact the financial institutions and ask them for help and understanding. If you have a financial person that you've been working with throughout your lives, talk to them. But getting an understanding of where you are today, what your financial reality is, and what your resources are, and not just the numbers, okay, but what kind of numbers are those? And how do I explain it? The nature of the asset is important. Is it liquid? Can it be spent now? Can it be used now? Is it taxable or not taxable? Is it an asset or a liability? Liability meaning debt, credit cards, mortgages, car loans, things like that. Getting all of this information in one place on black and white where you can look at it, you start to see what your reality is. Okay. An issue I've seen quite a bit, in most of the cases I've worked on are traditional marriages where one partner took care of most of the finances, just like mine. One partner took care of raising the family, creating the home. Sometimes that's the wife doing that, sometimes it's not. But whoever that person is often doesn't understand what their resources are because they haven't had to balance the checkbook. They haven't had to pay credit card bills and things like that. They don't understand how the mortgage works. Okay. So getting an understanding of that helps them also formulate a more realistic picture of what are the options. Where can I go from here? They're not just asking for pie in the sky and then fighting tooth and nail to get it. Okay. They're understanding what's the extent, what is realistic.
All right. Let me remind people that I'm Catherine Miller, and you're listening to Divorce Dialogues. We're a podcast dedicated to educating people about divorce-related topics so everyone can divorce with dignity. Please subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts to be sure that you don't miss an episode. And I'm talking today with Jon Tanner. He's president of Summit Advisors at William Joseph Capital Management about the finances of divorce. And so, one of the things that when people, Jon, are getting divorced, they have to divide up the assets, assuming they have those to divide. And the assets, I always think of it as a fruit bowl with different kinds of fruit, right? It's not all apples, bananas, or pears. You have some apples, some bananas, some oranges, and some pears. Some of that fruit needs to be peeled and some of it doesn't. So basically, people are looking at retirement accounts, residences, other real estate, and businesses. And so what are some of the common financial pitfalls or pitfalls for people to look out for when they're looking at the situation and how to avoid them?
Probably the biggest one is focusing on the big number, the headline number. How much is in the bucket without really giving any thought to what kind of things are in the bucket. Okay. When you're talking about dividing assets on paper, the numbers you can have two assets that look identical in value on paper, a house, a retirement account, for example. And today in that snapshot, they do look equivalent, but you have to dig deeper. You have to look behind the surface, the nature of the asset, the sustainability of the asset. Okay. An IRA account or a retirement account is fairly easy to sustain without it doesn't cost you anything. It is there. It's going to continue, hopefully, to grow in value over time. Whereas a house, there's an ongoing investment that has to be made into that asset to keep it going. Okay? You've got mortgage, you've got insurance, you've got maintenance and upkeep, heating bills, electric, and so forth. Those kind of things, you have to look out over the longer term. How sustainable is that house, that 6-bedroom house that you're going to be living in all alone? Do you really need it? Are there better alternatives for you that would be better suited to your new lifestyle? So I think the biggest pitfall, like I said, is looking at the big number and saying, all assets are treated equally when they're really not. You really have to look at, you have to, again, we're going back to an earlier part of our conversation where you have to really understand what your values are and what your needs are so that you can then pick and choose the assets that are going to best fit your needs when you're starting to try and formulate whatever you're going to ask for and what your life is going to be beyond the divorce. And that's where, the financial planning portion comes into play, where we're looking out longer term. We're not just looking out 2 or 3 months to the end of the divorce. I wish they could all be that quick, but you're not just looking to get through the divorce. You're looking to get through the divorce and be set or staged for the next phase of your life. And you want that staging to be solid.
And I think what you're saying, John, is that you should think about the implications of different types of assets, not just their underlying value, right?
Right.
So when I say in the fruit bowl, there's oranges and apples. Well, if the orange and the apple weighs the same thing, but the orange needs to be peeled before you eat it and the apple doesn't, then maybe, the amount
Yeah.
of calories that you take in, I'm riffing here now, from that fruit is less in the orange because it's actually the edible portion of it is less than what it weighs, or
Yeah.
some analogy like that.
Your fruit salad analogy is reminding me of an old adage, that knowledge is knowing that tomatoes are fruit. Wisdom is knowing it doesn't belong in a fruit salad, So, which I don't know what that has to do with our conversation, but yeah, it's understanding, and this again goes with unpacking the emotion from the data, the financial and the numbers, so that you can actually see what the nature of the asset or the liability is. Okay, a home comes with a mortgage, a car comes with a loan, credit card is a debt. So understanding all of this helps you decide, number one, do you want that asset or do you want a different asset, which can help, oftentimes can also help lead to beneficial compromises in the process. When you detach from the asset and the need, for example, having the house because of whatever attachments or fantasies that creates in your mind, you can then focus on the assets that are going to be more beneficial to you, and maybe the house, the other person, so it satisfies their need. So, it allows you to see possibilities in the process that you might not otherwise see if you just focused on the numbers.
All right, great. Let's talk a little bit about, John, how you work with people. And I know that you've said that working in divorce has taught you the value of empathy and creative problem solving. Can you share an example of where that approach made a real difference for someone?
There are many of them, but I think the one that sticks out in my mind is there was a couple I worked with several years ago, and they both become so entrenched and dug their heels in on their own positions and what they wanted and needed. I mean, we never see this happen, right? You know,
He's kidding, listeners. He's
yes,
kidding. See,
it's
this
more
happen a
more
lot.
often than not, it is the case where both parties are really, they're stuck in their positions. They're stuck in what they want, what they think is best and fair. And, they're oftentimes coming at the same problem, the same challenge from two different directions. So they can't see that they're actually trying, they're both talking about similar situations, but they become so stuck that I took a step back and just developed their two positions as a financial settlement plan and put them up side by side so that they could actually see them side by side. And once we did that, which is not something you're going to see happen in most of your traditional divorce litigations, it's something that the collaborative process and even mediation allow for the opportunities. Once we put them up side by side, there was kind of an aha moment. It got real quiet and they both just kind of looked at each other, and you could almost see the shift in mindset in how they were moving forward. And it opened up some possibilities for compromise that they had not even considered. And it allowed them to move forward with the process. And it also, in the process, it de-escalated a lot of the tension, because in that shift, they realized that they were both working towards the same end, but they didn't realize that they were so stuck in their perception. So,
That's really interesting.
but in order to do that, I had to really put myself in their shoes. I actually had to do it on two separate days. I had to work on one spouse's financials one day and the other spouse's on the next day, because I really had to mentally put myself in their position and try to create this plan from their perspective. So it showed me the value of really, walking a mile in their shoes, if you will.
Yeah.
Um,
You're listening to the Divorce Dialogues podcast, and I'm Catherine Miller. Divorce Dialogues has been educating people about divorce and relationship issues and finances for over 10 years. Please subscribe to the podcast and don't forget to check out our previous episodes on the podcast website, divorcedialogues.com. And I'm talking today with Jon Tanner. He's president of Summit Advisors at William Joseph Capital Management. And if you want to contact Jon, his contact information and website will be in the show notes along with this episode. So I certainly encourage you, if you've got any questions about divorce finances or transition finances of any kind, reach out to Jon and see if he can help you. Because I know, Jon, you emphasize a team approach, working with lawyers, accountants, and other people on your client's team. Why do you think that's so important during a divorce?
I think it's most important in any situation you're dealing with finance or you're dealing with divorce. It's really important to get qualified guidance, to get qualified advice and expertise. And I know that many of us in professional capacities like to wear many hats. We tend to wear more than we can carry. But I believe that working with different professionals, the clients at a very difficult time in their lives are getting the most qualified advice that they can. And working as a team, the professionals working as a team ensures that our that advice and that guidance is all going to be congruent. So we're all going to be talking the same language, if you will. We're all going to be working together to provide the guidance. So it may not eliminate entirely, but it certainly minimizes the amount of conflicting information that the clients may get. So it also has the effect of taking the clients out of the position of having to decide what advice is good and what advice is not. Okay, because we're working together as a team. We all know our boundaries and they're well established. So we're all working in our own backyard, if you will. The client has a level of comfort in the process that they're getting quality information and that they're not, they don't have to be the ones to decide whether or not it's quality information. They can
Yeah.
spend their time on deciding how do we use it. Okay.
That's good. I think that's good advice. So some listeners might be just considering divorce, maybe just at the beginning of divorce and mid-divorce, and all of them might be wondering, well, when should I bring in a financial advisor into the divorce process? So what is your advice on timing and how to choose the right person for you? Because not all financial advisors come with the same skill set.
Well, in terms of when to bring a financial advisor into the process, the sooner the better. Okay, that's the divorce process typically begins with the lawyers. Okay, regardless of what methodology you're going or process you're going to be using. But as soon as you possibly can bring a financial person into the mix to help you sort through and organize the financial data and figure out what your reality is that you're working within, the better, because oftentimes it'll prevent the big decisions being made without adequate information. Okay, decisions that may not be reversible or may not be easily reversible, whether it's because it just can't be reversed for legal reasons or because once a person makes a decision, they move on to the next step. Now to backtrack
That's a
time,
tough hole to dig yourself
yeah,
out of.
sometimes that's a difficult one to manage for anybody. So the sooner you can bring them into the process, the better. But that being said, even if you're in process already, if you're in the midst of the divorce, there's never a bad time to bring somebody in. Okay. No matter where you are in the process, it's always a good time to bring a financial person in, especially if you're having issues with the financial aspect of the process. And what was the second part of your question?
Is how to choose the right one because people come
Okay.
with different skill sets.
Yeah. There are some basic ways. There are certain certifications and designations that as a financial advisor I can get. which are educational backed. There's a certified divorce financial advisor. That's the CDFA after most people's names that have experience. But also, especially if you're working with a mediator or you're working with a collaborative team, you're embarking on the collaborative process, quite often the other professionals have a working relationship with somebody that they already know has the experience and has the knowledge. For example, I'm sure you've worked with several financial advisors over the years, and you can be a good source of recommending somebody or at least giving somebody choices. These are people that we've vetted. These are people we know that have a basic understanding of the divorce process. They have, a very good, very deep understanding of the financial process and how it works in divorce. So, you've got those two areas. I don't advise going into the yellow pages if anybody
No.
knows what those
But
are
what
anymore.
about
I'm dating
chemistry?
myself.
John, I think
Yeah.
that one thing that I think is really important in the attorney-client relationship is good chemistry. You
Mhm.
should feel like your lawyer cares about you. You should
Yeah.
feel like they understand where you're coming from.
Mhm.
These might be difficult conversations that you might not like having them, but you should not dread talking to your lawyer. And I would imagine that there's similar things about the financial advisor too, right? Or am I wrong about that?
Yeah, no, and any professional relationship that you have to have a chemistry there. You have to have a connection to feel safe with that person.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. If you don't, then you're going to be second guessing and questioning all the advice they're giving you, which really significantly reduces the value of that guidance and can often lead to poor decisions going forward. So having that chemistry, developing that chemistry early on is really critical. And don't be afraid that if you meet the first financial advisor and you just don't feel it, don't be afraid to say, sorry, I really think I should try somebody different.
Yeah. Lawyer
Especially,
too.
yeah. Well, I wasn't going to say that to you here, but the thing is, look, I've been doing this a long time, so have you. And one of my favorite sayings is, you will never be able to offend me. I've got rhino skin. I've been doing this so long. I don't take it personal. I don't bring judgment to the table. So if it doesn't work, I understand that. I mean, it could be as simple as I've got a new growing beard coming in because my winter season is about to begin and you don't like beards. I remind you of your ex. Who knows? It doesn't matter the reason.
Yeah.
What matters is that you feel comfortable and safe with the person and you trust their advice and guidance. That's the critical piece. That's a critical piece.
Well, I'm tempted to end with that because I think that's really important. But I'm going to ask you one more question in the last couple
Yeah.
of minutes. And that's, what is one piece of financial wisdom you wish that every person going through a divorce understood?
I think probably the biggest thing is that you have more control than you think. Okay. If you can peel away a lot of the anxiety and the emotion shrouding the process with with good guidance from your advisors, your legal advisors, your mental health providers, your financial advisors, you can gain control over the process and how you move through it and beyond it. I think that's probably the biggest piece of advice. It's not the end of the world. The world is not ending tomorrow because you're meeting with the lawyers. Okay. There is life after this, and you will get through it. You will adapt and overcome. You
Well,
will.
maybe those are good words to end on. You
Yeah.
will adapt and
Yeah.
overcome.
I think you have more control than you think you do, and trust your advisors to help you get through it.
Great. Jon Tanner, thank you so much for being my guest on Divorce Dialogues.
Well, thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.